one moment, please. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, questions for the solicitor. With respect to council taking a formal position to request safety zones or bubbles, do we have any legal opinion that they would indeed be constitutional?
What I will say is that before the creation of what I think we're calling safety zones or bubbles, it would be necessary for whichever level of government was considering them.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, if either provincial or federal or any level of government is considering creating a safety zone, it would be necessary to consider the Charter of Rights and Freedoms because of the fact that this sort of a zone is, at least in the way we're using the term, is a way of limiting speech.
And do we have any of that? Do we have a report in front of us? Do we have any of that information? Before we formally,
there's
because
nothing
we'd be
here
formally
today.
fine.
Yes, there's nothing here today, and I would strongly advise against implementing any sort of a limit on the freedom of expression. And that is implementing. This is of course a request,
Yes.
but actually taking a step to create a limit without the staff report and analysis. Because at some point, the council would be asked to defend its decision in court, and without that kind of analysis, it would be very, very.
And what would that report entail?
The analysis is would essentially require demonstration that the pressing and substantial concern, that the proposed limit is rationally linked to that pressing and substantial concern, and that the proposed limit does not do more than is required to address.
So given that we don't have that report, we don't have that legal opinion, we haven't done that study, and we don't, in all honesty, have control over what the province will not do. They can do it on their own if they choose to, right?
Well, they could certainly. I would assume that they would do that kind of analysis.
They would want to do that due diligence to
Yes,
inform
yes.
their decision too. So that we don't know. So now we know what we don't know. As far as what we can do to substantively, in a genuine, real way, support safety in our communities that would not infringe upon anyone's charter rights, are there things that we could do that we could work on that would be real and meaningful?
There are already some tools for addressing protests where there might be harassment, intimidation, or hate speech, or violation of a noise bylaw.
Councillor Pasternak, question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the city solicitor, on October the 11th, 2023, we moved a motion, the mayor moved a motion entitled Keeping Toronto Safe from Hate. And under item 5, we would ask a number of different city managers, including yourself, to work with community organizations and enhance improve safety and security in community safety zones, aka bubble zones. And I understand this was, the thought was we'd use bylaws to do this. I understand that city and municipalities, it's very troublesome to try and use bylaws to implement bubble zones.
I would not recommend that, certainly not without strong evidence.
Okay, so that's why we're here today. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm speaking hypothetically because I don't have evidence to analyze.
Right.
Or advice from other members of city staff who would have that input.
Right, but we passed this 7 months ago, and my understanding was that it'd be very hard to use bylaws to implement what council had asked you to do.
There are certainly other tools available, yes.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, plan B system where a municipality looks to the next level of government for legislation to help it with.
That is the place that the city would look to.
So there are examples of bubble zones, certainly when it comes to healthcare workers and protecting women's right to choose. Has there been anything, to best of your knowledge, that impedes charter rights? People can still protest, they can wave their banners, they just have to step back, maybe 50 meters, not block entrances. The requests are very minor.
My recollection actually of those zones is that they don't prohibit protest, they prohibit certain activities within the zones that would amount to intimidation of those who wish to use the facilities. So
Well,
protests could occur within the zones.
Yeah, but under the Safe Access to Abortion Services Act 2017, they're creating zones of 50 meters and up to 150 meters by regulation. So no one's telling them they can't protest. There's nothing in that legislation that says people can't protest. They have to just step back a bit so that other people's rights are preserved.
I believe that people could protest within the zones. But they cannot intimidate women who wish to use the facilities.
Okay, that's a little different than what I'm
But they could protest.
Yes, so we agree that under bubble legislation, no one's trampling on charter rights. No one's saying you can't protest or you can't express your views. You're saying you have to respect the charter rights of others.
Any legislation, what I will say generally speaking, is any legislation that limits expression must be very carefully crafted and supported by very strong evidence.
So what we're sorry.
It must be very carefully crafted and supported by very strong evidence that would justify an infringement on freedom of expression.
So,
Easy to prove.
Are charter rights, and this is an obvious question, it's obvious, who are charter rights for? The protesters or the people who want to access an abortion clinic or healthcare workers who want to treat charter rights for the protesters or for those trying to save lives and I guess run basically abortion clinics?
Charter rights are for everyone.
Charter rights are for everybody.
Sorry, statewide.
Well, yes, because there's a bubble zone under the criminal code for healthcare workers. So, Madam Solicitor, the city solicitor, could you just repeat that one more time so it's clear for everybody who charter rights are for? Are they for the protesters or the healthcare workers and the people who are trying to be protected in
Charter
abortion?
rights are definitely for everyone, yes.
They're for everybody. So a balance, is it safe to assume there's a balance that we must find?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sachs, questions?
Yes, thank you. Again, for the city solicitor. So following up on my colleague Councillor Castanet, as you know, we had a unanimous motion of this council more than 7 months ago asking for safety zones around community institutions. And you agree that not a single safety zone has been created for any institution in Toronto, correct?
I'm not aware of any, but
Okay.
I'm actually not the best person to answer that question.
All right, well, that's, I think it's clear that there are,
I'm not sure if the police have done any work in that area, but I'm not familiar with them.
Can anybody answer the question?
No? Madam Speaker, I'll keep going. It's clear that there isn't a single safety zone that's been created in the 7 months this council unanimously asked for it. Neither have we received any staff reports with any advice from legal services on how to implement that motion, correct?
Well, Madam Speaker, there was no request for a report from me.
Right. We haven't had any report come back to council with any action in response to our unanimous motion, to the best of your knowledge, correct?
not that I'm aware of. I have given advice on similar issues in the past, but I have not been asked to report on this specifically, no.
And you said you had no evidence to analyze, so despite the many conversations and meetings with the mayor, the number of police advice to Jewish institutions that they need to take precautions, you haven't received anything to which to start your work? On 7 months, you made a motion?
Generally speaking, Madam Speaker, when I'm asked to provide advice, I work with a client division.
Just one sec. Councillor Pruitt, the solicitor is answering questions and you're standing right in front of her talking. Okay, please. Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So generally speaking, Madam Speaker, when I'm asked, I provide advice on something, I work with a client division or agency that provides information and instructions.
So you're telling me that neither the city manager, nor the mayor, nor any other part of the city government has acted as your client to take any action on our unanimous motion in October, is that right?
Well, there's certainly been conversations and work, meetings and work has been done.
But
And
nothing
I've
that
certainly given
resulted-
advice, I've certainly given advice.
Right, and the main advice you've given is ask the province, it'll be hard for the city, we should ask the province, is that a fair summary?
I've also identified some other tools that can be used to address the situation, yes.
All right, well, tell us, what can we do as a council, given our unanimous resolution, to actually create some safety for the Jewish daycares? My 3-year-old grandson was with people screaming at his window. The synagogues, Jewish community is the only part of this city that has to have bars in order to have a prayer service or a daycare. What are you suggesting we do about it?
Well, in terms of a legal tool to address this, I don't have information to analyze under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in front of me today, so I'm not prepared to do a charter analysis on the floor, on the fly. What I will say is that there is a Trespass to Property Act, which is a tool that can be used by property owners with respect to their own property and activities on their own property. There are a couple of institutions in Montreal who have obtained injunctions. There are criminal offenses and there are some bylaw offenses that the police can enforce for us as well.
Well, they haven't, and trespass to property doesn't help in relation to the sidewalk, and also puts a lot of cost on the property owner. But let me ask the city manager. City manager, have you or anyone else in the city acted as a client to get action on council's unanimous resolution from 7 months ago?
That was your last question.
So through the speaker, actions have been taken. I think the police have shared the actions that they've taken, and they have, my understanding is they have laid some charges related to hate. We have within the city convened some folks to look at potential safety mitigation factors that would be there under the work that we can do with hostile vehicle mitigation. Things that we've been doing for years from a city perspective, and extending that work now to look at where there might be evidence that should take place. And at least one organization in the community is taking us up on some of that work. So there have been pieces done. We also have worked with the city solicitor and have discussed how we would, should a private property owner undertake work under the Trespass to Property Act, that we would support that should the police also indicate to us or other parts of the city that there are real needs for us to, what I would say is support the work of the property owner to extend some of that trespass to some of the city property that surrounds, so you don't get a situation where someone simply takes the step onto the sidewalk and says, now the trespass doesn't apply. So those are the actions that we've taken, and I think those align in some ways with the work the council gave to us in October, and so there's a few examples for you.
Thank you. Mayor Chow.
I
I understand, this is the question to Solicitor. I understand that in Montreal, there are 2 synagogues that applied for injunctions and was able to receive it. And it was able to extend it. So is that a tool
Yes,
to provide a buffer zone, we call it that, through the injunction, under the existing law, to protect people being able to attend places of worship?
yes, it is.
And they were successful in court to do so, I believe, right?
Yes, they were, and, they were granted extensions. I believe they've expired at this point, but yes.
Okay. So, let me understand that very clearly. Right now, under the existing law, one could apply and get an injunction if the place of worship believe or feel that there are grounds, whether it's for safety, harassment, any number of reasons, and the court could grant it, and that has been done in Montreal. Has anyone applied, any places apply for injunction that are, for example, daycares, faith-based community facilities, schools, places of worship? Has anyone applied for an injunction in Toronto to create a buffer zone?
I'm not aware of any injunctions having been granted, but I'm also not aware that there have been applications in Toronto.
You're not aware there's an application, and you're not aware there's an injunction that has been granted, right?
That's correct, yes.
So what I'm hearing is that the existing law already provide facilities when it could be even a home, to protect oneself. And other than injunction, isn't there a trespassing law that one could apply so that it also create a place where if someone come close to that area, they can then be charged with trespassing?
Yes, so for the injunctions, there is a test that has to be met, and the court would have to make a determination before granting. With the Trespass to Property Act, an owner of a property can exercise their authority under that legislation to create conditions of entry for their property. And there's a process of providing notice under that legislation and requesting police assistance with enforcement.
Okay, so I'm hearing there are several laws that one could use to protect places, whether they are community facilities, schools, daycares, etc. Let me ask one other thing. If any motion that is in front of us today passes that asks about creating safety bubble zones, I will then ask you to report to this coming June executive committee whether any application of bubble zones would violate people's charter rights to assemble and for freedom of expression. Will you be prepared to come to the executive committee to provide some analysis whether it violates people's charter?
I could certainly prepare that report if requested.
It might be very brief because there's not a lot of time. Okay,
Yes.
so that would come to the executive committee to look at whether one does violate or not violate people's charters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Moyes, you had your name up. Did you remove it?
Just one comment.
Okay. Is it question? We're in questions.
Is it, yes, good
Okay.
question.
But your name isn't up there.
I know I took it off,
And now I have to time you, so you'll have to put it, thank you.
There you go.
Back up, thank you.
Just one
Okay.
question. Since October 7th, has Toronto Police spent time around synagogues and mosques to protect and schools and other spaces? Of those?
So I have heard about that anecdotally, but I don't know firsthand.
Speaker, I'll just add, I'm not speaking on behalf of the police, but in meetings that I've attended with the police, not only have they attended sites, they have deployed and mobilized services in neighborhoods where they feel that there are risks that need to be taken. So they are doing community-based policing as well as analyzing any protests and working with what's happening in our community on a day-by-day basis. So they have deployed resources in specific ways, both at a neighborhood-based level as well as at certain times to individual facilities within the city.
If my memory serves me correctly, since October 7th, Toronto Police have spent over $10 million in extra resources in the city protecting
15 million.
15 million, protecting various, I'm going to say religious assets in schools and just city resources.
So through the Speaker, I don't know the exact figure, but I do know that it's north of $10 million, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now we're moving to speakers. Councillor Matlow, you are up. 1 second, please. Sorry, oh, you were down to question, I didn't see your name, sorry, let's go back to that. Question staff, Councillor Bradford, your name is there you go. Go ahead,
Thanks.
you're ready.
Yep, thanks, Madam Speaker. To the city solicitor, is there any legal issue with the city making a request to the province to consider introducing legislation on a topic like this or on any topic?
So I don't, Madam Speaker, I don't generally see a risk in making a request to the province.
I want to go back to some of your answers to Councillor Matlow and just confirm your answer that when the city makes a request to the province to consider introducing legislation, just a request, does that harm anyone's charter rights?
No, a request would not diminish charter rights. Certainly an exercise of power, if that's what it's about.
Following the same line there, would council making a request to the province on its own, does that infringe on the Constitution?
No.
And back to something that you, I think, alluded to earlier, would you expect the province, the federal government for that matter, to consider their charter rights when they propose legislation? Is that a reasonable assumption that governments in Canada, the Ontario, the province, the federal government will consider charter rights when they're proposing legislation? Is that a
Federal
reasonable
and
assumption?
provincial governments are required to exercise their legislative powers in accordance with the Constitution, of which the charter is part, yes.
So not actually just to consider it, but actually execute it in accordance with.
Yes.
For those injunctions in Montreal that the mayor asked about, are you aware of whether they were issued proactively or were they applied for and issued after and during days of people protests outside some of the facilities?
After.
Right. And can you confirm that the Trespass Act would not apply on public property, say the sidewalk in front of a place of worship? Is that correct?
Well, it could apply, the property owner would need to exercise the authority. So, but it certainly applies.
Right.
If the owner of private property exercises its authority under the Trespass to Property Act, their exercise of that authority would not apply to the
protests and the charter, and if there's any background or case law related to where these occur. It's my understanding that typically protests are used to influence individuals with power. Whether that's a political power or something else. But if a protest occurs somewhere where there isn't that relationship, is there anything that we can glean from previous case material, previous rulings and decisions?
I have to ask you a question about attempts to limit the right to protest on private property.
Maybe another way to look at that is, if something is occurring outside of a school,
Yes.
and there's a demonstration going on, and then whatever the cause is, but if the individuals that have power over this or seek to be influenced by demonstration aren't at the school, or they don't go to the school, the courts see that differently. Like context matters, does it not? Right?
Context does matter, yes.
So that's not the equivalent of a protest in say Intercom Square or Queen's Park or even on the side of the road, right? Where somebody passing by may not be.
Context does matter, but there is generally seeking a right to freedom of expression, which includes peaceful protest. The location is somewhat relevant. For example, a protest inside a square is different from a protest inside the daycare center.
Right. Okay, and just generally on injunctions, there was some suggestion before that, perhaps we could apply for them. I've never applied for one, I don't know, and I guess one would have to hire a lawyer to go to courts.
Yes.
But, and so, is that a burden for an organization to do that? Are there pro bono people out there that help with this sort of thing? I don't know.
There are people who do pro bono work. The Trespassing Property Act process is simpler because, yes, an injunction does require witnesses and evidence must be provided to meet that test.
The trespass to property refers to when people are on private property. Right?
Yes.
Like the owner of that property would have to trigger that mechanism. But if the protest was occurring on public property, that's a different process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for telling us.
Thank you. Councillor Bravo, question.
Thank you, Speaker. To the city solicitor, I heard you say that, that this motion does not contain an analysis about how, charter rights would be protected, but it asks the provincial government to take an action, correct? And I believe you said that, the provincial government, in theory, would need to consider charter rights in relation to the crafting of any legislation and in their analysis.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we would be asking the provincial government on the assumption that they would do the analysis around how to craft legislation while protecting charter rights. However, has this provincial government that we would be asking to ever use the notwithstanding clause to override charter protected rights?
Well, they've. They've certainly used it, but I can't really comment on the charter rights piece.
Yeah, so the province has used notwithstanding clause in relation to overriding some of the charter provisions of some of this legislation, including freedom of expression in the political campaign context is the one that comes to mind immediately.
So the government we would be asking without analysis or background information or any kind of due diligence around how we would protect charter rights, freedom of expression, would be
being one, has used a notwithstanding clause. In fact, did they not use it during the middle of a municipal election, which deprived both candidates who put their name forward in 2018 and electors and donors to those candidates of their political freedom, and similar political liberties protected under the charter?
In that instance, the province did introduce legislation that referred to the notwithstanding clause. That legislation was not and a slightly different scenario in that case. It wasn't necessarily about freedom of expression.
Right, it was about political rights, but in terms of whether this government is particularly attuned to charter rights, that was my question. And there were also, I believe, the notwithstanding clause played a role during a strike by education workers. And is it inaccurate, or is it accurate that in fact this provincial government has invoked the notwithstanding clause more than any other government or provincial government, and that in fact we would be asking in a very unsettled area of work where we haven't done our due diligence here, for this government, which has repeatedly used the notwithstanding clause to craft legislation that would require charter analysis. However, there is an inconsistency in the way that they apply these principles. And I don't ask you to comment on the political side, but this is the reality that they.
This government has certainly used the notwithstanding clause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We, in the very near-term future, will be looking at a couple of options of how to help the Jewish community feel safer in their places of worship in particular. And my question is, what can the city do? I read in these letters, deputation letters, of moms who are scared because their kids are in daycare and they feel threatened. Councillor Sachs talks about her granddaughter or grandchild that is experiencing fear. What is within the city's purview in this situation that we could take action to help mitigate the fear that the Jewish community is currently experiencing?
Through you, Madam Speaker, I'm not able to comment on the fear itself. Where there are offenses being committed, then there are enforcement options. If the offenses are connected with demonstrations, then the police generally are responsible for the enforcement activities. And I've already spoken to a couple of things that the property owners can do.
A peaceful demonstration is not necessarily intimidating from a legal perspective. So while a person who's trying to go into their synagogue to worship, the act of someone standing there with a sign peacefully is not illegal, but for the receiver of that, it could feel very intimidating. So are there limits in terms of the law to create that safe space if we allow this close proximity between people who are entering places of worship and demonstrators?
That is correct, that peaceful demonstrations are legal and they are protected. The type of response that you are seeking is perhaps not illegal. I am not the best to advise. that would be information that council would want to seek from an official other than myself. I could certainly provide legal advice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you put my name. Councillor Matlow, to speak.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I have a motion. My motion is based on the fact that we want to see the city take action with the tools that we have, substantive real action, to ensure that everyone in our city feels safe and is safe, and that we are providing every resource we have to ensuring that, sorry, is the motion up?
Put the motion on the screen.
All the time?
They don't have a motion.
What?
They don't have a motion.
Okay, I will, if I can stand down and. Yeah.
They said they don't have a motion.
Okay, we did send it in, so I just want to confirm.
Speaker, can we recess for 5 minutes while we sort this out, please?
Hold on for a moment.
The staff are saying that there was no motion sent to the clerk. Okay, we'll go to Councilor.
No, Speaker, I'm sorry, I rose and asked to get your attention.
Yeah, but this motion is not
No,
ready.
I'm sorry, I do want to raise a point of order.
What's your point of privilege? Councilor Perks, if the motion is not ready, we'll go to the next speaker. Councilor Perks.
I'm sorry, Speaker, I asked you if we could recess for 5 minutes. It is often the practice when we need to confirm with the clerk about something that we do take a brief recess. That's within the rules, that's something we do.
Point of order,
I'm
Madam
asking you to do that.
I have the floor, Councillor.
So Speaker, I'm asking you to call a recess to allow to confer with the clerk.
Point of order, that is not a standard operating procedure.
I'm sorry, it's in the rules.
Councilor Bradford, please, can you find out where
It's in the rules, Madam.
Madam Chair, point of order?
If you want a 5-minute recess, we'll have to take a vote.
Point of order, can I just,
I'm here to,
I see something. What is in front of us right now? It's 18.16. Right. So we are debating that motion, right?
right?
And then there is, I see under here 2 motions. And one's a man circulator, and then, so I see the motion in front of us, send motion to clerk, okay? There's one motion in front of us.
But Mayor, the clerk is saying they don't have it.
Right.
They don't have it.
They do have it.
Okay, then, please, not at the same time.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak so we can save some time around here.
Let's settle right down.
I've asked you.
Enough. But, Mayor, the clerk doesn't have the motion. You may see it.
You have it. Is she blind or something?
Councilor Bradford, please don't turn on your mic. Okay.
Where's the motion, Councilor?
They have it, they do have it, the other moment.
They have it?
They said they need 2 seconds.
So you're saying you have it now?
Yes, they do.
All right.
They are ready.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to run from
They have personal privilege.
Councilor Bradford, point of person.
What we just saw here was obstruction There was a disregard for the rules and the procedures, and it was embarrassing. And the folks who were involved, that wasn't right. What was just done here was not right, and I'm rising on a point of personal privilege to call that out. There have been a number of procedural errors and gamesmanship tonight that are completely unacceptable and undemocratic, and I wanted to rise to make that comment.
No, and thank you for that. Now, I just want to ask, no, Councillor Fletcher, hold on, please. Please, I just want to straighten this out. To the clerk, did you have the motion? Or did it just arrive?
Not at the time.
They have the motion, that's the only test.
I just want to clarify that, please, and no disruption. Councillor Fletcher, I want an answer from the clerk. Did you have the motion? Okay, so what I'm told by the clerk is that when Councillor Matlow started speaking, they didn't have the motion, but they do have the motion now.
So I would ask.
Councillor Fletcher, point of order.
We have had a few apologies here tonight at council, but saying that it's gamesmanship, under your leadership and the clerk's leadership, I don't think that's fair comment, and I'd ask you to have the council withdraw that. Thank you. That's a very serious allegation, in my opinion.
Well, Councillor Fletcher.
Under your leadership, Speaker.
Yeah, but Councillor Fletcher, I'm asking the clerk.
Well, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying there has been an allegation of gamesmanship,
Yeah.
that you've allowed that, the clerks have allowed that, the council's allowed that, and I don't think that's a fair comment. The
Okay,
rest
well-
of it's fine, but that one isn't fine.
Okay, thank you. Let's just continue with this. Councillor Matlow to speak.
Thank you. To be fair, I actually do believe that the motion was submitted, but we will resolve that, and that's on material at this point. A question, so I do have the motion that we've been discussing, I'd like to move it. And the motion asks the city manager, within the tools that we have as a city, to not ask another level of government to do something that they have not done, that they've chosen not to do, and that they would, I imagine, be receiving the very same advice, that there's no evidence that what is being asked of them is constitutional, that it would infringe on people's charter rights, that it either wouldn't happen on their own accord. Excuse me, Madam Speaker, if I may, I'm just being interrupted by.
Is this gamesmanship, Speaker?
Paula?
Jesus
Madam
Christ.
Speaker.
So are you.
Madam Speaker, the reason I move this motion and the reason that I ask you not to support Councillor Bradford's motion or the amendment that Councillor Pasternak intends to move is because I know that when we create policy, we need to be mindful of every community, the needs and the safety of every community. But there is a specific issue that I think is the reason that we're having this debate in the first place today. The Jewish community is feeling very vulnerable. There is real and valid fear that people are experiencing, and it's a combination of things. 2,000 years of pogroms, trauma, combined with the massacre of October 7th, and an alarming rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish hate here in Toronto and around the world. People are feeling really vulnerable, like many other communities are too. But there's an experience in the Jewish community where there's a frustration and a feeling that they want action. They want leaders to take action to ensure that they are safe. They both feel safe and they are safe. And there are moments where we need to make decisions about how we respond to emotionally charged, difficult moments, requests. And I choose to take a rational approach that respects the fact that we have a constitution, that we can't ignore that fact, that we cannot ignore the fact that we have a charter of rights that are there to protect everyone, all of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from, and no matter what community we're a part of. And at the very moment when we feel most emotional and vulnerable and scared, it is even more important to take a deep breath, to not react, but respond thoughtfully and responsibly. And that's what I hope that you will do as a council. Councillor Bradford's right about one thing. A request doesn't infringe upon the charter. But that will be a formal position of City Council, Toronto City Council, asking the province to do something that our own solicitor has expressed great discomfort about doing. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. But here's the biggest shame about it. It's virtue signaling. It won't actually do anything. It won't save a life. It won't support a single individual. It won't protect anyone in the community. And the reason I say that is because even that bubble doesn't stop a protest. Not that a protest in itself is wrong. It's the behavior.
Councillor Matlow, please wrap it up. Your 5 minutes is up.
Let's focus on the intimidation and harassment that people experience.
Thank you.
Rather than infringing upon charter rights.
Thank
shared
you.
by us all. Thank you.
Councillor Burnside, you have a question? You want to question the mover. 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you.
Burnside.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker. I'm actually struggling with the fact that for both these motions, I'm trying to understand, given that we can't direct police, Councillor Matlow, to do anything, and I'm not sure where MLS comes in with protests, isn't our energy better directed towards the federal government to actually write the criminal code and have responsibility for those overarching policies? Like, I'm just trying to understand why.
No, that's a thoughtful question, Councillor Burnside. The issues that we're experiencing are happening today. And while people can debate in Ottawa what they're going to do about the criminal code, and the Ford government actually is not moving on the very thing that we're even debating and asking them to do. I think that we can take responsibility and action that is responsible, that's prudent, and that's actually using existing tools that are within existing legislation. And what we did in the fall was ask for moving ahead with the plan. Now we need to actually get that in gear. And I would like to, it's imperfect, I know, but I would like to actually do what we have some control over, our own staff. And if you read the way that I wrote the motion, no, we can't direct the Toronto Police, but we certainly can convey where our expectations are as far as what we'd like to do to support our communities who are feeling vulnerable and work with the police because they're going to be a part of the solution, along with an interdivisional team of staff, including MOS. But I also want to say, just as a courtesy to Mr. Carlton, in no way am I suggesting that MOS should be doing anything that they're not meant to do either. And I think that's important to say.
So I guess just to follow up and just to understand it completely, so this motion is your belief that there are tools at our disposal that can help with the situation, help address people's concerns and assuage their fears. So is it your belief then that Toronto Police could do more with the tools they have?
What I hear, I asked a question of the police regarding this matter in the last 2 weeks, Councillor Burnside, and I asked them, is there a situation, because like we just heard from the city solicitor, for example, that even if they did the bubble, which again we have no evidence that it isn't unconstitutional, but even if they did that hypothetically, they wouldn't actually stop a protest outside of any building in the entire city. So that's not actually even a helpful option, even with the intent of the movement. What the police did say to me is that whenever there's bona fide evidence of an actual threat, they actually do have the tools legislatively to be able to protect people, to even create, corridors or cordon people off when necessary, so that they can keep the peace and prevent any harassment or violence.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak, 3 minutes clarification of the motion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You mentioned that you'd like an action plan. I don't know what that is. You supported bubble zones back in October of 2023. All of a sudden, it was okay with you then. It's not okay with you now. You've had 7 months to do an action plan. How is your motion any different than what we passed last October? And isn't it just a journey to nowhere?
I would submit to you that a better example of a journey to nowhere is to write a request to a government that has all the power to do whatever it wants and isn't doing it, most likely because they've been advised that if they did that, they would lose in court because it's unconstitutional. So it actually raises false expectations, and it's a very hollow promise to a community that's feeling vulnerable that you and I know well. I would rather actually, I'd rather take some
Councillor
substantive
Matlow,
action.
can you please put your answers short, so could we have more questions?
I would rather take substantive action that we can take within the tools that we have as a city.
Okay, Councillor Pasternak, your next question.
Your frustration,
Councillor Pasternak, your next question. You only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
Councilor Matlow, you have no report back on this. Is this just like an endless doomsday motion that will go nowhere, do nothing, and never report back?
I know, well, the hyperbole aside, Councillor Pasternak, I actually intentionally didn't ask for a single report. We're done with reports. We don't need reports anymore. When it comes to the things that we can do that we know that are constitutional. In fact, the sad thing is that we don't have a report on the very thing that Councillor Bradford's motion requests, which has no justification or support at all. In other words, why don't we do what we can do with the tools that we actually have, rather than hope that the province does something, that is unconstitutional.
Okay, Councillor Pasternak, one more question.
Yeah, so, you mentioned charter rights a lot. The city solicitor said that this, our motion presents no risk, does not violate any charter rights, and it's up to the province under this motion to draft the legislation and make sure it complies with our charter. Why would you think this motion violates charter rights when our city solicitor does not?
The motion itself doesn't violate the charter, but there is a risk. I mean, here it is. My motion says go and actually do what we're asking staff to do, and actually work on a real plan, not a report, and go do it. The motion that Councillor Bradford moved, the risk is that at the moment where we are feeling justifiable pressure to take real action, our answer will be something that is a false promise, that's unconstitutional, and is fundamentally ethically wrong.
Councillor Matlow, please, we only have 3 minutes, so please answer the question.
I'm answering.
But don't go on for 3 minutes on answering a question. All right? It's not fair to the people asking the question. Councillor Sachs, 3 minutes. Councillor Sachs?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Matlow, you've claimed over and over again that a safety zone would breach the charter. You're not a lawyer yourself with any expertise in Section 1 of the charter, correct?
Absolutely correct.
And you're aware that the city solicitor has told us that she has not performed a Section 1 analysis on this, correct?
That is my concern, that we don't have
Right,
any.
and you haven't yourself retained an expert in this field to prepare such an opinion, correct?
We don't have the evidence that it's constitutional to base our request.
You haven't obtained an opinion, so when you say it's unconstitutional, you're just saying that off your own head and without the benefit of proper analysis by a qualified expert.
I agree with you that if this motion was done in a way where there was time to do that.
Please answer my question.
I agree with you. I agree. It would have been
Okay,
better.
so let me go on, please, time is short. So given that you're simply, section 1 is about balance, charter rights are not unlimited, just as the city solicitor told us, everyone has charter rights. And the idea of the safety zone, which would mean that 99.99% of Toronto is available for protests, some very small areas would not be available for protests, that is susceptible to a section 1 analysis, which has to be done before we know whether there is a breach of the charter.
I respectfully, the city solicitor not only said that she had concerns, but she also disagreed with the suggestion that it would actually limit protests at all.
Okay, let's stick with the actual question. So let's know, you said you were going to pass the plan. Again, we've had more than 7 months. We know that the police have spent more than $10 million dealing with protests and protecting Jewish and Muslim institutions. What exact actions do you say this council can obtain and have done that don't reach the charter? What exactly, don't just say action plan, what actual action?
I respectfully submit to you that I can't answer that question, nor would I pretend to be. Because you're right, I'm not a constitutional expert, but I'm also not the city manager and I'm not the police chief. But I do want the people that we entrust to come up with the plan to actually go and implement one that's effective. In fact, I just don't want to throw in the towel and say, well, you know, if something hasn't happened yet, that we give up and we say, well, let's just ask somebody else to do something that we have no idea if they'll do. I don't think that's...
Why don't we do both? Why don't we do both? We have been trying to get our staff to do something for 7 months. They haven't. Is there any objection to asking them to take action and also asking the province, which clearly has authority to create safety zones?
That was your last question.
Because the ask that I hope we make to our own staff, we know is constitutional, we know can be supported and justified, and we do not know, based on what the city solicitor said, that what we would be asking the province would either be constitutional, right, or supportable in court, and I don't want us to be asking for something.
Okay,
like
thank
that.
you. Councillor Bradford. Oh, you took your name off? Okay.
Madam Speaker, it's
Mayor
Councillor
Chow,
Chow, was that
question.
the end of the question?
Mayor Chow, question. 3 minutes.
Thank you. You and I were at a meeting, 2 meetings, where the city manager, transportation, MLS, police, it was at least, I don't know, 12 people, am I right? Yourself included, where we had a very good discussion to begin to put together. Well, actually, there was a plan, and I believe the staff participated in a brilliant idea that you had, which was a walk around to make sure some of those areas that are worried are protected, which was a walkabout. So, you suggested it, and there was an action involved in it, I believe.
There were 2 things that I was hoping to come out of those meetings. One, as you just stated, actual real, like, no virtuous signaling, no sort of like, you know, things to kind of boast about, or like just quiet but real work to just help places of worship, day schools, etc., know that they actually have a safety plan supported by the city and the police. And yes, we were working on that. And, you know, and I appreciate, by the way, Councillor Pasternak and Councillor Cole and Councillor Sachs participated. And I appreciated that they were informed by those discussions. And what I was hoping to continue out of those meetings is doing exactly what now I've got to move a motion for, is to like actually get on with the plan.
That's right.
And unfortunately it's been interrupted by a motion that kind of takes this into this kind of, you know, like, let's go ask the province to do something that probably is unconstitutional, so why are we doing that anyway? I'd rather just focus on real, substantive, meaningful work. And I do get that people are frustrated, so the best way to respond to that frustration is to actually work harder and do more. And that's what I want to see us do.
that, meeting, there was a walkabout to look at producing some safety, bollards or something in front of one of the organizations I don't want to name. The city manager participated in that walk around, and there were some recommendations that I believe our city transportation department was working on, they're nodding, that are beginning to take shape.
Yes, and there was direct outreach to many institutions that do need our support, that are asking for our support. And I'll add another thing, the city manager personally even asked to speak with me, and I know many of my other colleagues, to demonstrate how serious he's taken it, and I'm actually optimistic that if we actually do the right thing, we'll get results, and I don't want us to be distracted from that.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, 3 minutes, questions, please.
Thank you, through you, Speaker. So actually, I just want to clarify. So in your motion, you seek to use the tools that we actually have at our disposal in order to, provide the safety that we're trying to provide, that we're all trying to provide, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you can sort of go into depth a bit more about what role you envision municipal licensing and standards playing, and what role you envision Toronto Police Services Board playing based on the work that you've already been doing to keep these communities safe.
So, like I said to Councillor Sachs, I don't want to sort of pretend that I should be devising the plan that we're actually asking the city manager to do, but I'll give you some specific examples. Part of it is there are actual physical ways to both ensure that people have safe access to property where there are religious institutions, but also to also address other safety concerns where there actually might be a bona fide threat of violence. And I want us to really look at surgical, realistic ways, site-specific, to address the unique needs of each site and what the community is asking for. I also believe that, even working with MOS and the police, and again, the MOS is one of the divisions that should be part of that discussion and where information is conveyed to, but they wouldn't be the primary ones to do any enforcement of the criminal code, for example. But if you get all the right people together, and this is what I've learned, this was the David Crombie School of Politics that I learned. If you get all the right people together, led by the city manager, the right divisions, and the police, they will use the tools that they have. And I was saying earlier that I asked the police, before we even start arbitrarily prescribing the answer to you, let's address the problem. Do you not have the tools you need to be able to create safe spaces and keep the peace and ensure and protect people from intimidation, harassment, or violence? And they said, actually, we do have the tools. I mean, they always want more. They would be open to other ideas to help them, but they are confident that they can do the work that we're asking them to do. And I want to give us a chance. I know people are frustrated. They're frustrated that they haven't seen as much as they want to see yet, but I want to give us a chance to get this work done, and that's what I'm asking the city manager.
Okay, thank you. Clarification. Okay, yes, you went to 3 minutes. Councillor Carroll, please, clarification of the motion.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I quite agree. I just want to clarify, and I hate to put the mover on the spot, but we have advanced circulated motions already before us that show us taking the original motion that was moved here and adding, in our request to another order of government, adding and perhaps use this detail, perhaps use this different description of the facilities we wish to protect the people entering them. Your motion is in stark contrast because it has so little detail in it. Is this really more about enabling than requesting? Because it looks like what you've got here is something that we're simply trying. Action plan seems to mean just enabling the city staff over which we can confer and in some cases direct and just enabling them to please proceed with that, because they are people we can direct to do so?
Councillor Carroll, exactly. Rather than arbitrarily prescribe something that won't actually achieve our goals, I'd rather enable staff and send a clear signal that we want that action to happen.
Thank you, that's my only question, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey's question.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, we know we can't direct police, so how do you think that police will do this, or what's your confidence in that?
Very, very confident. So the motion doesn't direct the police, because we don't. But the table that the mayor referred to, the police not only were at the table, but they were exemplary contributors. And they want to work hand in glove with the right city staff to identify the best ways and the most important places where they can be of support to community safety. So I'm very confident that the chief and the police will want to work with us on this plan. But that's why I very intentionally didn't suggest like direct them or anything.
So
you can't.
In previous questions we've had with police, like, it's been very clear that they struggle with tape and they need to get all these approvals and all that. So they're very limited dealing with intimidation. It seems like your motion might go help with physical harm, but how does yours address intimidation?
I mean, my understanding, and tell me if you have a better understanding, but if people are being intimidated, harassed, that's against the law.
But the bar on harassment is extremely hard to prove.
So the area that you're going into is, like, when it comes to the bar of harassment, or even the bar of hate in this country, there are bars that are different from other jurisdictions, you're right. But that's not, like, we're not gonna resolve that in council. But what we should be doing is using the tools that we have, working with the police with the tools they have, to do something actually substantive and real. And my concern is that if we just do things that are symbolic, or just kind of asking other people to consider something that they already have the power to do but they're choosing not to, it won't immediately actually make any material difference or protect anyone.
So why doesn't your motion do both? Use the tools we have and ask for more tools?
Because, and I've said this before, the tool that the member's motion asks for, and Councillor Pasternak's motion would support as well, the amendment. Our own city solicitor has expressed concerns about there's no report in front of us. We have no information from a constitutional lawyer. We have no formal opinion from the police for that matter. We have nothing in front of us to provide us with any assurance that what we would be asking for isn't unconstitutional. And I don't believe that Toronto City Council should be in a position, in an not ill-informed, but uninformed way, making a request of something that very likely will be deemed unconstitutional and could infringe upon Canadians' charter rights. That's fundamentally wrong, and I think that's an irresponsible reaction rather than a thoughtful response.
Thank you.
Councillor Bradford, 3 minutes clarification of the motion.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. This is another version of the same motion that was passed last year in October. Could you please explain to me how your motion will actually deliver on council's adopted request that today we haven't seen the results on?
Thank you for that question. There's frustration that since the fall that people haven't felt or experienced enough done. And what I want to come out of this motion is genuine, real action on our part to respond to the motion that was approved. And you'll see in the motion that it doesn't say like report or any of that, kind of. I want to, as Councillor Carroll quite correctly characterized, it enables them. It says, go do this work with us together.
Would you be open to a friendly amendment where there's some accountability in this, i.e. a coming back to haven't seen anything for 8 months.
Intuitively, like I agree with the principle of what you're asking. I'll be really candid about my concern. Like your member's motion, if we ever choose to bring this matter to the floor, we can do that any meeting we want. So if we don't believe that there is the action that we are hoping for, we can do that if we choose to. My concern about sort of in an ad hoc way saying we want a report back is that if we bring this debate, I mean, look what's happening now, right? You and I have had some good words together about it. And I don't want us to re-debate and get into all of this when I'd rather just get some work done on the ground. And sometimes that's even just like quiet, wonky, just like get some work done.
So could
I don't want to turn into this.
Could you explain then how this accomplishes that? How is this different from the fall? Because I'm not seeing it, and I'm seeing zero accountability, and I'm not hearing how it comes back to council. So I actually don't see how.
Yeah.
Please explain to me how this will accomplish any of the things that haven't been accomplished in the fall and has zero accountability built in.
That's a fair question. So you know as well as I do, there is never mind zero accountability. If there's a way to express less than zero accountability, that I'm referring to the Premier's accountability to us as far as the decisions they make. He doesn't need to report to us. He doesn't need to answer to us. So I'd rather actually keep some control.
With that in mind.
So I'd like to keep some control here.
Sure.
Where we can have an iterative working relationship with our city manager to see some actions that we can take that we can also then convey to the community.
So would you consider it a friendly amendment then, in that sphere, to have this come back so that we can check in on the progress?
That was the last question,
I'm asking,
Councillor
so
Bradford.
we can check in on the action plan.
Let me discuss that with you offline, but I would only reiterate the concern that I just expressed, that I don't want us for no reason, let's say there isn't that time, that's when they should report. I don't want us to go through yet another debate, because every time this happens, we open up a podium where then extreme voices sometimes are raised, that people get hurt, and I don't want to go in that direction, and I don't want to create this space for that.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Clarification of the motion, please.
Just want to be clear that your motion is about protecting these institutions, faith institutions, childcare, etc., during this most difficult, tense time, without the danger of violating charter rights, without the danger of the city saying, set it up that we would actually be in a situation.
We are confident that we can do this.
And that's your approach. Protect, but not go on a pathway where we would end up violating or asking for the violation.
Yes, and if I may add, I don't think anyone would want to infringe on people's charter rights, but that could be the consequence.
Could be the consequence. So I think that's important to clarify that as to your motion itself. And then I would also want to clarify that while there was this action plan, there's the impression that absolutely nothing has been done. And I would not want to leave that impression either, that we're starting at zero. Is your motion something where we're starting at zero?
No,
or we're understanding
not at all.
We're on a pathway?
Not at all. I think I don't believe in alternative facts, but I think there can be coexisting truths. And I think the coexisting truths are that there actually is work being done. And I want to see that proceed, and I want to see that be successful. But equally, there's frustration in the community that they would like to see something that lets them know that real action is being taken.
So would you consider real action being taken, and I'll just look at my ward, where at the mosque, where there's been Islamophobic writings and other things in that way, that the local police division is taking very great care to be in touch regularly with the leadership. Is that not something that we're understanding is happening already?
Yes.
And which doesn't violate any rights, but it does, I hope. I don't know if it's taking place anywhere else in the city, but I know in my ward, in these instances, there's a very close relationship.
in these difficult times, to protect places of worship.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you believe that's
Okay.
happening in other locations?
Yes. I've seen that happen in locations throughout the city.
So is that something this action plan could focus a bit more on? Because I know when there's a difficult issue in a community, the police being there, knowing they're in the neighborhoods, being in touch with the leadership of community groups is one of the most important things that can be accomplished.
That was your last question.
And they are certainly part of the plan.
Okay. Councillor Pasternak to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a motion that we put on the screen, and of course it's been circulated. And this motion takes Councillor Matlow's concepts, Councillor Bradford's concepts, Councillor Sax's amendments, and of course my ideas, and puts them all into one to make sure we can get it all done. We can make sure we send a strong message to the province. We need one of the tools that Councillor Matlow was talking about. We've got to reach into the toolbox, and one of these tools is asking the province for bubble zones in legislation. The second part is we define the vulnerable institutions that we're trying to protect. At the same time, we want to make sure that any kind of labor union strike and the right to picket is preserved. We're asking the city manager to develop an implementation and education action plan, which Councillor Matlow supports, based on the regulations accompanying the legislation, and convey the action plan directly to relevant participating bodies, including municipal licensing and standards, Toronto Police Services Board, and report back to City Council once the requested legislation receives royal assent. So if it sounds like we've all been here before, we have. On October the 11th, we passed a motion. Item 5 supports the concept, and we called them at the time community safety zones, which are in fact bubble zones. It was supported unanimously by this council, including every member of executive. Now, when I hear the voices of objection, I don't know what's happened in the last 8 months. Certainly the Constitution has not been changed. The Charter has not been changed. What's happened is we haven't been able to deal with many of the problems facing our society. Now, we've heard from the city solicitor, and she says that my motion is not a risk to the city of Toronto. She also says that the bylaws we thought we could use in the past would really not work. They would probably not uphold in the courts, and they would not do what we wanted to do. I strongly urge you not to support Councillor Matlow's motion. His action plan is an action plan to nowhere. All this does is repeat the same mistakes that we made last October, with all due respect. We didn't have a report back date. We didn't have specifics in the motion. All this does is spin us in endless circles with no resolution and no ability to keep the city safe. You know, the city solicitor did mention that one of the tools in the toolbox is injunctions, and she's absolutely correct. But there's no guarantee you can win injunctions. On May the 1st, 2024, McGill applied for an injunction, and it was rejected. On May the 15th, 2024, McGill applied for another injunction to get protesters and encampment off their campus. Once again, it was objected. If you rely on injunctions, and it is an important tool and it can work sometimes, you are at the mercy of the court. Toronto Police, and I've spoken to Chief Denku about this, I don't know whether Councillor Mallow has, they need a more prescriptive tools on how to deal with the over 600 protests that have costed $15 million across our city. One of the best things we can do is go into that toolbox. Now, if you look at examples of where this is done before, we're the outlier. The federal government has made amendments to the criminal code to protect healthcare workers and people seeking access to health services. And I quote, "These changes respect Canadians' freedom to voice their concerns and protest in a safe and peaceful manner and ensure workers' freedom to take labor action consistent with the Charter of Rights and freedoms. The Ontario government passed the Safe Access to Abortion Services Act. Once again, this does not stop anyone from protesting and anyone from speaking out. This merely allows women to access abortion clinics without harassment, intimidation, and violence. That legislation is on the books. Now, the City of Vaughan is actually taking a chance and going ahead with bylaws. We've decided not to go that route, but they are also on the same trajectory as both the provincial government and the federal government to make sure that they can protect, they have the tools to give the police the tools to protect vulnerable institutions. This is something that protects everybody. They do not violate our charter rights.
5 seconds, Councillor
They
Pasternak.
do not violate the charter. They are a good, responsible way to keep our city safe. Thank you.
Sachs to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I know it's late. I did pre-circulate a motion. I'm withdrawing my motion as it's been incorporated into Councillor Pasternak's motion, which I'm asking you to support. I ask you not to support Councillor Matlow's motion, which I agree would lead us to nowhere. I need you to remember that Jews in Toronto, on average, are 14 times more likely to experience a hate crime than anybody else in the city. But 5 times more likely to experience a hate crime than Jews in other places like New York City. It's bad here. But what the city has done, and I was at those meetings, we heard again today, well, you know, we're going to do something, the city manager talked about, we're going to do something about hostile vehicle defense. A little bit, maybe. But we haven't done one yet. There isn't a single institution, Jewish institution in Toronto that has received hostile vehicle defense in the last year, much less in the last 7 months. And we don't have a standard, we don't have a budget, we don't have people assigned for it, and it doesn't matter how many times I ask, maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll get some hostile vehicle defense so that we don't have trucks mowing down children as they stand in line to get into their daycare. But that doesn't answer what the motion was about last October. It doesn't, having some physical barrier that keeps a truck from murdering your grandchildren does not provide protection from intimidation. It doesn't provide protection from harassment. And although the police have done a great deal over the last 7 months, and I thank them for it, they have necessarily had to scale that way, way back. And again, particularly in my ward, I can see, right after October 7th, there was a police car in front of the Jewish Community Center where that daycare is located. There isn't anymore. When the mayor says, oh, well, use the Trespass to Property Act, what she's saying is we're going to download the responsibility for public safety and privatize it. Make it the responsibility of the synagogue to raise the money, not only to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have to spend to have security. And who else of you has to have a security or an armed guard to take your child to daycare or to go to a prayer service? Nobody else. Nobody. But on top of that, the mayor's now suggesting we should have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more, hire lawyers and do injunctions. I've been a litigator, I know how much that costs. This is again, ducking responsibility, failing to take action. What this motion asks us to do is to do the things we can. First of all, to ask the province, which has authority to create a safety bubble, has done it for the abortion clinics, could do it for religious institutions if they choose to. We should at least ask. We do a lot of asking the province to do things. Most of the time they don't listen, but we ask because it's important that we ask. And it's important that we ask in this case. And in addition, we should be asking staff to develop an action plan, implement it, and tell us what they're doing. Because I've pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And yes, we managed to have a walk around at a vulnerable Jewish institution, but it has not led to any action. And having the police phone people regularly is great, but it does not protect the child going to school, or me when I go to synagogue, from fear, intimidation, harassment. And that shouldn't be the situation where we say to one small minority in the city, tough luck, you're on your own, it's too contentious for us to think about. The assertions that you keep hearing that this is a breach of the charter rights is a conclusion that's not justified. Charter rights are to be balanced, and we haven't got that balance right now. What we have is the protesters are free to protest anywhere in the city, and anyone who wants a very tiny space free of protest is on them. So I'm asking you to absolutely do not vote for Councillor Matlow's motion. Do vote for Councillor Pastek's motion, and those who are paying attention know how rare it is for me to agree with Councillor Pastek's motion. But this is one of those cases. I'd also like to point out that in Councillor Matlow's motion, you notice he's done absolutely nothing for the daycares and the schools, which have been so common a source of threats. Like the Jewish high school, where right after September 11th, a group of men walked up to teenage girls who just had to go out for lunch in front of their school and threatened to kill them all. This is the kind of thing we're living with, and the city has done nothing to protect us, and we need some action. Please vote for Councillor Pastek's motion. Thank you.
Councillor Moise to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to surprise and to thank Councillor Matlow for his motion. I think it's a pragmatic motion. It's a made in Toronto solution. Since I've been here for the last year and a half, we have sent many letters to the province and to federal governments, and we rarely get a response from them. This is very much on their radar since October 7th, and they've done nothing. Why would they do anything now? What Councillor Matlow is saying is that there are tools that we have at our disposal as a city council, as a local government, that we can actually use. And we haven't used those tools, and we should use it. Toronto Police has spent about $17 million spending time around daycares, around synagogues, around mosques. I know this because they've done it in my ward. And I think we need to continue to allow them to do their jobs as they have been doing with the resources they have. I know the mayor has actually taken money out of the special fund to actually give to Toronto Police so that they can actually have the resources that they need to continue what they're doing. So to imply that nothing has been done, I think is not, you're doing a disservice to the civil servants who do the best that they can under the circumstances. I know too, for me, actually recently in the last 2 months, I've had about two or three mosques that were vandalized. Now I know my colleagues across the city have had synagogues vandalized as well. And again, we're doing what we can to support those communities as we rightfully should do so. Last summer, at Church and Wellesley, we had a lot of hate protests. Religious organizations coming into the village with their religious signs and saying, we're sinful and doing what we're doing is wrong. And again, we rely on Toronto Police to help us deal with those hateful behaviors. For me, it's all encompassing. As a black man, I feel vulnerable in the city most days. Earlier today we saw Councillor Holiday standing beside a building incognito. If that was me, I'm sure the police have been called and I've been taken with handcuffs. We're all vulnerable. And it's important to recognize that we're all in this together and we need to support one another in the best way that we can. And it's unfortunate that this is here today. I wish it was not here today. And yet we've been forced to discuss this, and it's a very emotional subject. And anyways, I'll stop there for now, but thank you.
Councillor Bradford to speak.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I rise tonight in support of Councillor Pasternak's amendment. Off the top, I will encourage you to vote against Councillor Matlow's motion, which he is working with on behalf of the mayor. That doesn't help. Okay, pause the time. Sorry, Madam Speaker, could you pause the time?
Ready for bed. Chris James didn't make that.
Go ahead.
I've lost like 20 seconds.
Well, you're putting it back in the time, I just had a point.
Yeah.
I'll give you an extra 20 seconds.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, there's some unfortunate, I know this is it's a difficult subject.
Just say what the point is.
Well, no, perhaps you didn't hear me, I have a point of resolution.
What is your point of?
Go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Councillor Bradford, said that I'm doing something on behalf of the mayor, and the honest truth is, I'm doing this as I always do on behalf of my community, and I'd appreciate if you change your hyperbole.
Let me correct it. My understanding was you were working with the mayor on this motion. That's not my understanding.
Uh-oh.
That's
Uh-oh.
not a point of personal service.
Madam Speaker.
No, it's not. It's not. It doesn't matter.
Should I start over? I can start. I haven't said anything other than that's something I should do. Okay. Thanks, Madam Speaker. Okay, let's try it again. I rise tonight in support of Councillor Pasternak's amendment. I think it's very thoughtful. I am asking, I am urging, I am encouraging council to vote against Councillor Matlow's motion. The reason I ask you to do that, of course, is while what he has proposed is completely benign, totally ineffective, and doesn't harm anything, it also won't deliver any results. The problem is it deletes the first part of the motion. And so if we want to see constructive action taken, if we want to work with the level of government that is in a position and has the tools and the ability to legislate in a way that would be helpful for the city of Toronto and the vulnerable communities who have been under attack for many months now, that's why you can't support it, because he's trying to kill that, doing it in a very nice and benign way, but let's be clear, he's trying to kill that. And so that's why you can't support it. So you vote no against Matlow, you vote yes for Pasternak. I want to step back and rewind the clock to 8 months ago, when the mayor had a motion that was unanimously supported by council. Everybody here voted for it, and it called for community safety zones. And that was because communities in Toronto have been under siege with vicious, hate-motivated attacks. Makes me very, very uncomfortable to see that type of hate in the city that we all love so much. And so the motion was brought forward. What we have learned in the month since is that council's ability to address those issues with the tools that we have at our disposal is very limited. It's very limited. And so we find ourselves in this situation months later with a staff team and police and MLS and all the different divisions who have been trying very hard and have had some success, and I'm not dismissing that. But we need to see more. That's what we're hearing from community. The idea here, of course, as the motion which has been amended, is to model off of existing bubble zone legislation, the same that was used to protect healthcare workers during the pandemic, the same that is used today to protect women's rights who are seeking services at abortion clinics, modeled off of that. The language is very specific. We're telling them to model it off of that legislation. You heard very clearly from the city solicitor this evening that we are not threatening any charter rights, violating the Constitution, all the hyperbole that has been brought forward by various activist groups. None of that is real by making a request of the province to introduce this legislation. Hell, we've got a motion too after this where we're gonna request the province to introduce commercial rent control. You think they're gonna go for that? But everyone here on council is gonna vote for it. Don't talk to me about virtual signaling BS. Don't talk to me about that in this council chamber. Let's equip our city staff with the tools. Let's put our best foot forward and make the ask for additional tools and supports that would help the city staff execute on the mandate to keep our communities safe. There's no reason why you can't vote for this. If you like Councillor Matlow's motion to sort of just ask people with no accountability or report back to do the thing we asked for 8 months ago, if you think that's helpful, I got good news. Councillor Pasternak's motion accounts for that. If you think additional tools or the consideration of additional tools from the provincial government would be helpful, you can vote for that too. And just to clarify, and to make sure that we're not thinking that this impacts collective bargaining or labor rights or petitions, we put that in this legislation too as well. We've put that in the motion. That is not the intention. We are protecting places of worship, faith-based institutions from the type of hate that has been allowed to permeate on the streets of Toronto for the past 8 months. It's unacceptable. I'll leave you with this. Councillor Pasternak, he is the mayor's envoy to support anti-hate. This is the guy on council that the mayor has tapped to support anti-hate in this city. This is his motion. This is his amendment. If we support him in that position, we ought to support him today with this motion. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the speakers. Mayor, did you want to speak?
The motion.
You were referring to the motion.
Of course. And the questions I asked the mover to that extent.
Okay, so that's it for the speakers, so let's,
Speaker, on a point of order, I just want to understand.
so, could I have the two of you sit and take your seats? Please? Councillor Perks, point of order?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the effects of different motions. So if Councillor Matlow's motion passes, it deletes the recommendation, but then Councillor Pasternak's motion amends it. So if Councillor Matlow's motion passes, there's nothing to amend, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So is everybody clear on that? If Councillor Matlow's motion moves, passes, Councillor Pasternak's motion is redundant. Okay. Put the motions on the screen. Yes. Well, that's the order, right? Okay. Recorded vote.
Councillor Crisanti, may we have your vote, please? Councillor Carroll, are you able to vote using the system?
No, I'm not. I'm voting in the affirmative on this. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Carroll, to confirm that was in the affirmative?
Yes, in the affirmative on Councillor Matlow's motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Speaker, motion won by Councillor Matlow carries. The vote is 13 to 11.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Our next item. Councillor Bradford, MM 18.24. You held down?